Hello and welcome. You're watching World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The Strait of Malacca is the absolute jugular vein of global trade. It is a narrow stretch of water, 900 kilometers long and from 65 to 250 kilometers wide between the Malay Peninsula to the northeast and the Indonesian island of Sumatra to the southwest, connecting the Andaman Sea and the South China Sea. As the main shipping channel between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, it is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. An estimated 94,000 vessels pass through the strait every single year, making it the busiest strait in the world, carrying about 25% of the world's traded goods, including oil, Chinese manufactured products, coal, palm oil, and Indonesian coffee. As of 2024, over 35% of oil transported by sea and 20% of the gas flowed through the strait. Every single day, an estimated 23 million barrels of oil and almost about a quarter of the world's maritime trade squeezes through this bottleneck. It is such a critical choke point for China that the Chinese even have a name for it. They call it the Malacca Dilemma. It is the biggest strategic vulnerability that the Chinese have that threatens Beijing's ability to even operate if the strait were to be shut down. Consider this: China depends on the Strait of Malacca for roughly 80% of its imported crude oil and over 60% of its total trade volume. China is heavily reliant on a single narrow sea lane that it does not even control. The strait is bordered by Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore and has a significant presence of the United States Navy and its regional allies. In the event of a geopolitical conflict or a blockade, China fears that its economy could be easily paralyzed. The Malacca Dilemma is a term that was coined back in 2003 by Hu Jintao. The China's Belt and Road Initiative that has sought to build land routes for trade, in fact, is actually an attempt to break China's absolute reliance on the Strait of Malacca. But has China really succeeded in breaking itself free from the vulnerabilities of the Strait of Malacca? Well, not really. And now there is a new player that is making its entry in its bid to dominate the Strait of Malacca. India's Great Nicobar project intends to change the very dimensions of who can strategically control the Malacca Strait. India is spending nearly $10 billion, that's almost about 90,000 crore rupees, to turn a remote pristine island into a massive military and logistics fortress. This is the Great Nicobar Island, and by building here, India isn't just upgrading its infrastructure, it is positioning a permanent geostrategic knife right at the throat of the Malacca Strait. The Great Nicobar Island project sits a mere 40 nautical miles from the western entrance of the Malacca Strait. Now, to put that in perspective, if you stood on the southern tip of the Great Nicobar at Campbell Bay, you're closer to Sumatra, Indonesia, than you are to the Indian mainland. For years, this island was mostly untouched rainforest. But the Indian government's mega project is completely transforming 166 square kilometers of it. The blueprint features three core pillars: a massive international container transshipment terminal at the Galathea Bay, a sprawling greenfield international airport, a highly advanced dual-use military and civilian complex. This isn't just a port, it's a permanent unsinkable aircraft carrier that is parked right at the front door of the Strait of Malacca. So why does this terrify Beijing? Well, it all comes down to surveillance and strike capability. China had tried to hem India in by building dual-purpose ports in Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Maldives, a strategy known as the String of Pearls. But none of these ports can solve their vulnerability inside the Malacca Strait. With the Great Nicobar project, India is establishing absolute maritime domain awareness and a dominance over the Strait of Malacca that no other nation even with their advanced navies, can exert. By upgrading the local naval air station INS Bars and by building a deep-water military berth, the Indian Navy can permanently deploy fighter jets, anti-submarine warfare aircraft and warships right at the mouth of the Strait of Malacca. If a conflict breaks out with China on the high seas, India doesn't need to sail a fleet from its mainland. Its forces are already there, and they can track every Chinese submarine, intercept every cargo vessel, and effectively shut down the Malacca Strait to hostile traffic. As the Iran war and Iran's capture of the Strait of Hormuz has shown, to dominate these key waterways is to dictate the terms of engagement. Wars are almost never fought because there is a choice. More often than not, wars are imposed, and dominating the Strait of Malacca gives India a chokehold on China's jugular vein. Russia this week pummeled Ukraine's capital with hundreds of drones and missiles in a string of deadly strikes. The attacks suggest that President Vladimir Putin has little intention of de-escalating his war after he declared this week that he believed that the war was coming to an end. Explosions shook Kiev, the Ukrainian capital, for over several hours on Thursday morning, as the Ukrainian forces tried to intercept and shoot down the drones and missiles. But many of the Russian missiles and drones evaded and overwhelmed the Ukrainian air defense systems. Now, the attack included cruise and ballistic missiles that Moscow often stockpiles for mass bombardments. In retaliation, Ukraine launched a series of long-range drone attacks targeting several regions in Russia, including the huge Ryazan oil refinery. After 3 days of massive strikes by Moscow against Ukraine, for anyone who expected that the Russia-Ukraine war would peter out in its fifth year, this week has been a rude shock. So what is actually happening on the ground? Our next report tells you more.
Wave after wave of Russian drones and missiles crashed into targets in and around Kyiv. As Russia unleashed a barrage of its sophisticated weapons in a bid to saturate the Ukrainian air defenses. Between 8 a.m. Wednesday and 8 a.m. Thursday, Russia launched a total of 1,428 drones and decoys, by far the largest sustained day-long drone attack against Ukrainian cities in the war so far. As the sun rose, rescue teams searched for survivors in the rubble of the collapsed buildings in Kyiv. At least 24 people were killed, including 2 children, the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, said. Dozens of others were wounded, including a month-old baby. The early morning bombardment came after several other deadly Russian attacks across Ukraine, including a wave of daytime drone strikes on Wednesday that killed at least 6 people.
I know a lot of people here. I even know many people from the building across the street, because I've lived here my whole life. And I want to say one thing. Even after this, we won't give up, because we are a very strong nation. Because the girl who died here, a 9th grader, was one of them too. You just didn't see yesterday how many of her classmates were here, from her grade and parallel classes, and they're about to graduate. Our youth don't deserve this.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky alleged that Russia had used some of its most advanced missiles to strike at civilian areas in Kyiv.
We are investigating in detail exactly which weapons, missiles and drones the Russians used this time. According to preliminary data, a Kh-101 missile struck a building in Kyiv. It was manufactured in the second quarter of this year, which means that Russia is continuing to import the components for missile production, the necessary resources and equipment, in circumvention of global sanctions. This must be a real priority for all our partners, to stop Russia's schemes to circumvent sanctions.
In retaliation, Ukraine unleashed its long-range drones. Ukrainian drones struck an oil refinery in Russia's central city of Ryazan, leading to 3 deaths according to local officials. A massive plume of dark smoke was visible billowing over the sky as a fire raged in the distance. Ryazan is located some 200 km southeast of Moscow. Robert Brovdy, the Ukrainian Drone Forces commander, also said that the Ukrainians had hit at least 23 military targets and facilities in Russia and also in occupied Ukrainian territory overnight. Raising the stakes, Russia. This week carried out a successful test of its Sarmat strategic nuclear missile. Putin, in televised comments, said the yield of the warhead of Sarmat is more than 4 times greater than any Western equivalent. And the range of this Russian missile exceeds 35,000 kilometers. He also described the Sarmat as the most powerful strategic missile in the world that would be deployed by Russia by the end of this year.
Now for Sarmat. We began working on it in 2011, and in 2018 this work and the advantages of the new advanced missile systems, including Sarmat, were publicly announced. Let me remind you what was discussed at the time and what the advantage of our latest system is. First, it is the most powerful missile system in the world, comparable in capability to the Voyevoda missile system currently in our arsenal, which, as just noted, dates back to the Soviet time. The total weight of the delivered payload exceeds that of any existing Western counterpart by more than 4 times.
The sound of the explosion of drones and missiles have drowned all talks of diplomacy. The Russia-Ukraine war has just witnessed its biggest escalation in many months, and the coming weeks will reveal what future awaits these troubled lands of Eastern Europe.
At least 15 police personnel were killed in northwestern Pakistan on the 9th of May when a suicide bomber rammed an explosive-laden vehicle into a police checkpoint, following which the police officers rushed to the scene and were ambushed by the militants. A couple of days later, on the 12th of May, 10 people were killed and dozens more were wounded in a massive bomb blast at a crowded market, once again in the restive northwestern border province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. The carnage continued on Thursday when an attack claimed by the TTP on a security compound in northwest Pakistan killed several paramilitary officers. Our next report tells you more.
Pakistan is fighting a war within, and in a major cause for concern, appears to be struggling to rein in the insurgents. On Saturday, the insurgency-hit border province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa was jolted by yet another militant attack. First, a suicide attacker detonated a car bomb at a police checkpoint, after which more than 100 militants stormed the police checkpost, opening fire, which resulted in the death of at least 15 police personnel.
Following last night's attack on the Fateh Kel police checkpoint in Banu, approximately 11 dead bodies, which had been buried under the debris, have been received at the district headquarters hospital. In addition, 5 injured individuals have also been brought to the district hospital, where they were immediately provided with medical treatment in the emergency department. My house is 2 furlongs, Murb 25 miles away from this post. When the explosion happened, the doors of 2 rooms in my house fell down. Then smoke started rising and shooting also started. I couldn't go outside the gate of the house. The children started crying in the house.
According to police officials, the militants also used quadcopters along with heavy weaponry in the attack. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, claimed by a militant alliance known as the Ittihad-ul-Mujahideen, ambulances from rescue agencies and civil hospitals rushed to the scene, and a state of emergency was soon declared in government hospitals in the city of Bannu. It is to be noted that in recent years, Bannu has been gripped by militant activity that has grown across Pakistan's border regions. On Monday, Islamabad, after concluding that the attack was masterminded by terrorists residing in Afghanistan, summoned the top Afghan diplomat in the country, though the ruling Taliban government rejected the allegations as baseless. As tensions escalated between Pakistan and Afghanistan, the very next day, 10 people were killed and dozens others were wounded in a massive bomb blast at the crowded Naurang Bazaar in northwestern Pakistan. Such was the impact of the massive blast that shop fronts were damaged and vehicles were mangled, even as people rushed to help the wounded and emergency vehicles raced to the site.
The blast occurred at the Fatak area, where traffic police personnel are deployed on daily duty. I was about 300 to 400 feet away from the site of the explosion. When I heard the blast, I felt that something had exploded. I looked up and saw smoke rising. When I arrived here, I witnessed very horrific scenes. Injured people were lying there on spot, and bodies were also present. People were lifting the bodies on their own and transporting them to the hospital. After that, rescue teams arrived and police also came. However, 2 traffic police personnel have been martyred here.
Since the Taliban stormed back to power in Kabul in August 2021, Islamabad, troubled by a spike in attacks on its security forces, has repeatedly accused the Taliban government of providing a haven to anti-Pakistan militant groups, including the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The Taliban has refuted these allegations, calling the militancy Pakistan's domestic problem. On Tuesday, the United Nations published a report saying that in the first 3 months of 2026, at least 372 Afghan civilians were killed and 397 others were wounded in conflict between Taliban government forces and Pakistan. A lasting deal between the two countries has proven to be elusive, despite several rounds of talks, with reportedly the security issues proving to be a major sticking point. The 2 brazen militant attacks within the span of a few days in the restive Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province have once again underlined the threat Pakistan is facing on the home front.
From the evening of the 14th of May through the 15th of May, ultra-far-right Israeli nationalists chanted racist slogans like "Death to Arabs," "May your villages burn," and "Gaza is a graveyard," in a state-sponsored flag march through Jerusalem to mark the anniversary of the Israeli capture and annexation of Jerusalem. The annual assertion of Jewish control over Palestinian East Jerusalem has grown even more extreme in recent years. And Thursday's event culminated with Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir unfurling the Israeli flag in front of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the 3rd holiest site in Islam. So what did the Israelis really do during this flag march on Jerusalem Day? And why is it significant? Our next report tells you more.
Thousands of Israeli ultranationalists marched on Thursday through the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's walled Old City in an annual event marking Israel's capture of Jerusalem in the 1967 war. Thousands of radical Israelis were bussed in from across Israel and occupied West Bank to participate in the flag march. However, Palestinians from outside the Old City were not allowed in by the Israeli police. As Israelis marched through the Muslim quarter that is home to over 350,000 Palestinians, some of the Israelis chanted, "May your villages burn" and "Death to Arabs" while waving the Israeli flags. Israel captured East Jerusalem in the 1967 war and later annexed it, a move that the United Nations and most countries have not recognized.
As a person whose great-grandfather fought here with the paratroopers in the conquest of the Temple Mount and the Western Wall, and also as a person who has actually lived here in the Old City almost since I was born, for me in general, the Six-Day War is simply a war that was truly a gift from God. Blessed be He for the salvation of the entire Jewish people and the land of Israel, in particular, simply from annihilation, what can be called from death to life.
The parade's path starts in West Jerusalem and ends at the Western Wall, a remnant of an ancient retaining structure revered by Jews as the Temple Mount, a vestige of their faith's 2 ancient temples. Muslims refer to that area as Haram al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary. Most Palestinians in the Muslim quarter of the Old City had shuttered their shops and gone home before the march began. But members of far-right radical Jewish groups who had entered scuffled with Palestinian residents still there, with both sides throwing chairs at each other until separated by police who entered the city that afternoon in force. Much of the tension was between government-backed marchers and members of a Jewish group standing together, which had come to protect Palestinian residents from political violence.
Well, this is actually for the 5th year we are here. We come here to do protective presence. This day, thousands of basically settlers and right-wing fascist, young and older people will be roaming the streets, chanting very racist things, trying to destroy, places owned by Palestinians and just terrorizing the whole place. In Jerusalem Day or the Flag Day, yes, it's becoming very violent, especially after October the 7th. It became a place where they can take out their anger on Palestinians that haven't done anything or harmed anybody. And it's basically for them, to show that they own the place while they don't. Their politics are very, we know their politics. They want everybody to be out of here and they want to take more homes.
At the Al-Aqsa compound, known to Jews as the Temple Mount, Ben-Gvir danced with supporters singing, "The Temple Mount is in our hands," as he unfurled an Israeli flag. The National Security Minister has led a campaign to erode the 59-year status quo, dating back to the Israeli capture of East Jerusalem and the West Bank, under which non-Muslims are forbidden from praying in the sacred area. Jordan condemned Ben-Gvir's stunt, with the Foreign Ministry calling it a blatant violation of international law, an unacceptable provocation, and a flagrant breach of the historical and legal status quo. Ben-Gvir waved the Israeli flag in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. At the parade, he told that more good things are yet to come to the Israeli people.
Happy Jerusalem Day. Today we raised the flag on the Temple Mount. Thank God, we had the quietest Ramadan, and we will continue and continue. Death to terrorists, and more laws, and more good things for the sake of this people. Happy Jerusalem Day.
Palestinians view the Jerusalem Day procession as part of a broader campaign to bolster Jewish presence across the city. To their detriment, they have long sought East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state.
An attack by armed rebels has killed at least about 69 people in the Ituri province in conflict-torn northeast of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, according to security officials, for more than 30 years, the mineral-rich eastern DRC has been a battleground for various armed groups who are vying for control of its many mines. Two ethnic groups, the Hema and the Lendu, have been locked in a long-running violent conflict in the Ituri province, which is a gold-rich province that borders Uganda and South Sudan. Armed men affiliated with the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, also known as Codeco, which claims to protect the Lendu, carried out attacks in several villages. Our next report tells you more.
Famous for its mineral wealth, ranging from cobalt and copper to uranium and diamonds, the Democratic Republic of Congo has been the hotbed of conflict and bloodshed for decades. Since early 2025, Ituri has seen a resurgence of the CRP, a group founded by convicted Congolese strongman Thomas Lubanga. Fighting between the CRP, the Congolese army, and the Codeco has been marked by widespread abuses and killings of civilians. The region also faces ongoing attacks by the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, a group formed by former Ugandan rebels that has pledged allegiance to ISIS. The M23 rebels, through American mediation, have agreed to a tenuous ceasefire, but have resorted to the use of drones to gain an upper hand. Congolese forces, long outmatched on the ground, have acquired Turkish and Chinese attack drones to strike M23 positions in the east. The M23 fighters have targeted sites including the airport in the northeastern city of Kisangani, where aircraft used by the government take off. Last week, a drone attack wounded at least 25 civilians in Mushaki, a farming area about 40 kilometers from Goma, now under M23 control. The injured, that included a 2-year-old girl, were taken to Ndosho Hospital in the city. Witnesses say the strike hit a market at a time when people were going about their daily lives, far from any battlefield. The UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC, MONUSCO, condemned a wave of deadly attacks targeting civilians in the east, including the Mushaki strike. The United States also denounced the attack, though without naming those responsible. The M23 has frequently accused the army of carrying out deadly strikes on civilians, but the United Nations experts have identified the M23 itself as a leading perpetrator of rights abuses in the region, where dissent is tightly suppressed in areas under the armed group's control. Natural resources that should have aided the progress of the Democratic Republic of Congo have in fact, combined with corruption, turned into the biggest curse for a nation that has been naturally so well endowed, resulting in unending strife, where each group wants to fight till the bitter end for resources.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.